Hello everyone. This video is being made because of a breaking news story. I'm filming this about 3 or 4 hours after. Hopefully, I can get it out by tomorrow. Actually, I already saw the news this afternoon, but I just haven't had the time. I had to eat too. Now I have time to wait for my wife and daughter to be available before I can film. This is about the Trump administration ordering the Department of the Interior to stop Harvard University accepting foreign students. This is a very serious matter. Before I explain this issue to everyone in detail, I want to talk about 2 other news stories. Actually, both are related to this situation. So, what's the first one about? It's about staff members who are working from European embassies, along with people from China and Japan. I want to go to the West Coast, the West Bank of the Jordan River, to visit the Palestinians there, to hear about the problems they've been facing in their daily lives lately, and to see if there was any danger. But on the way, Israeli police opened fire on them. Of course, it wasn't their intention to hit them, but the situation was still very serious. According to Israel, they said the group took a route they weren't supposed to take. There are a lot of places that are off limits. For example, if you want to go to the West Bank, you have to use routes designated by Israel and only talk to people approved by them. It's just like in North Korea. But those diplomats said that wasn't the case. Of course, if you fire at diplomatic personnel, even if you don't actually hit them, it's still a serious matter. They all lodged protests with Israel. The background to this incident is that Israel, after a year and a half, launched another attack on Gaza, and it stopped for 75 days. Emergency aid to Gaza. 50% of children have nothing to eat. It was truly heartbreaking. In such an environment, yet another unfortunate incident occurred. It happened in Washington, D.C. There was a youth program being held, organized by Israel for display. In the end, someone opened fire and killed a staff member from the Israeli consulate, as well as his fiancée. It was tragic. That person was an employee of the Israeli consulate, an embassy staff member. The 2 of them were about to get married, but they were all killed. The perpetrator turned himself into the police and then loudly shouted, "Free Palestine." In this kind of atmosphere, as we know, even the slightest incitement of hatred only leads to tragedy. In the end, it benefits neither side. I'm telling you, it's no good for either side. Let's get back to why this is the case. Why do I say these 2 news stories are related? Because Trump, in fact, accused Harvard of failing to curb campus violence, specifically anti-Semitism, and also of paying the price for cooperating with the Chinese Communist Party. This is actually quite interesting. Harvard has indeed cooperated with the CCP. For example, its Kennedy School is where high-ranking CCP officials have gone to study. But the US and China weren't even enemies to begin with. US and China are now adversaries. So going after them now for having cooperated with the CCP in the past is honestly pretty laughable. Alright, first let me talk about how serious this is. It involves more than 6,800 students right now. I've done some research on this. These 6,800 students have to transfer to another school immediately. Otherwise, they'll have to leave. That's how serious it is. Out of these 6,800 students, 1,500 are Chinese. Second largest group, Indians, 1,300. After that, it's Canadians, Germans, and Brits. And so on down the list. There aren't any Hong Kong students included. No Hong Kong students top 10. I looked at 10 countries. So, how should I put this? Harvard is the oldest university in the United States. It was built in the 1630s. Its reputation is such that. How to count the best universities in the world. There are two things where Harvard is definitely number one in the world. One of them is it has the most graduates, notably alumni, for example, around the world, or professors who have won Nobel Prizes. There are over 200 of them. From the beginning until now, over 200 people out of 1,600. Harvard. The second thing is that it's the wealthiest. Its endowment is $60 billion. That's pretty incredible. All right, let's take a look. Has anything like this ever happened before in history? No, it hasn't. If you really stretch it, you could mention the Chinese Exclusion Act of 1884, which didn't allow Chinese people to come and study during World War I. President Wilson didn't allow German students to study at universities. And then some Germans were expelled, and some were even detained. But there was never any action taken against a single university. Take such action. All right, this is him. How does that authority work? According to the Act, which is also known as the Academic Exchange and Immigration Act, it allows those universities to join this program. And then people can get a visa and come to study at their schools. These universities have to operate within a quota. And this quota is set by these universities being on the approved list. In principle, it's the Immigration Department. The Ministry of the Interior and Immigration Department approve it. According to federal law, it can only be done if you want to suspend these programs. You must, at the federal level, publish in the Hong Kong Gazette, United States Constitution published, and it must be based on national defense, national security, and the overarching principle of public safety. To have the authority to enact such a regulation. Otherwise, those students can, based on procedural justice, simply apply to the courts to stop this order, if necessary. So now, it's very clear that Harvard has already filed a lawsuit and is currently suing the U.S. government. So, according to the law, it's very clear that, first, this violates procedural justice, and second, it violates the First Amendment. The First Amendment clearly states, back in the 1960s on free speech, but it also makes it clear that academic freedom is part of freedom of speech. The government cannot control academic research just because of differing opinions. Control over academic research. That's the point. So, basically, of course, and obviously, there are also other constitutional human rights principles that can be used as a basis. That's the situation. So, Harvard is definitely going to file a lawsuit. But what I really want to say is, whether you support or oppose this, whether you support Donald Trump or oppose Donald Trump, what I want to say is to maintain academic freedom is extremely important. Why is that? There have been two periods in human history when ideas flourished wildly, leading to countless inventions, which greatly benefited the world. One of these was the Greek period. For philosophy, in tragedy, for mathematics, research in these areas has benefited us even after more than 2,000 years. It was a great academic explosion, and this explosion of academic achievement, well, I just read a book about it, called The Culture of Freedom, discusses this ever-present, so essential need for freedom, which actually arose in a unique environment. Due to a combination of chance factors, in Greece, this led to a fundamental and basic form of democracy. This form of democracy, how did it come about? Due to geographical factors, terrain was fragmented, and the city-states were small. If it were a large country, it wouldn't work. And also because there was an emperor who died heroically. People didn't want an emperor. Deal with it. And then there were reforms, which took shape over time. But it was really a series of coincidences. The same factors. You became a set in Sparta. That was very authoritarian and totalitarian. But in places like Greece, they developed something that was basically democratic. Why was that? That book was written by a German historian. The main reason is, for some reason, the Greeks had this trait. They didn't want others to tell them or teach them what to do. They wanted to take control of their own destiny, to protect their own freedom, and to make their own decisions. They refused to be subjects of others. This kind of spirit, he said, was really just a coincidence. So after Greece and Rome, it disappeared. This thing wasn't passed down. Then, after it reached Venice, specifically in Italy, Greek culture was brought back again through the Arabs. And it was Western Europe's turn to begin, with Western and Northern Europe developing another pursuit of freedom and democracy. The main idea of the whole book is that this is all a matter of chance, if you don't cherish it. Right now, in our time, which is of course the most brilliant period for academia, the 20th and 21st centuries, it's also because some countries have taken this path of freedom, upholding systems that champion human liberty, which has allowed everyone's thinking to truly flourish and diversify. But human nature isn't really like that. I've always said this. Humans have a tendency to favor the union of church and state. That's why there's still Islam, and even now there are Islamic theocracies. In fact, people are still very prone to obey authority because they don't want to make decisions for themselves, especially when it comes to things they haven't seen with their own eyes. It's best if someone just tells them what to do. They also don't trust and even look down on others, thinking that others shouldn't make decisions for them, because many people in this world are stupid. That's why populism, time and again, challenges this culture of freedom. Of course, as you all know, what I'm talking about is, back in the 1930s, democracy was already hanging by a thread. On the right, there were the Nazi fascists, and on the left, the communists. At that time, people thought democracy could never win against authoritarianism. In the end, all those authoritarian regimes collapsed. They all ended up gone. That was really quite a stroke of luck. Now, he says, we're really facing the same kind of impact from right-wing populism. I'm not trying to say whether this support is for or against something. I just want to tell everyone that it's really important to uphold certain principles, namely, a commitment to the rule of law, freedom, and human rights.